Hey everybody, Mr. Duker back again with super simplified social studies, trying to say that 5 times fast on the beginning of the American Revolution. Let's not waste any time and just jump right into it to see what is going on. So remember, in the years prior, the colonies in England have worsening relations. The years after the French and Indian War, see my previous video, England had put a lot of taxes on the colonies to help pay for the war, and eventually that becomes punishments for the ways the colonies were acting out and the anger and there's a lot of increased tensions. Relations are bad, but you don't start a war over a tea act. You don't start a war over a tea party. What starts the war? Well, shooting is what usually starts wars, and we're going to get to that right now. So by 1774, all of the colonies are meeting for the first time in what we call the First Continental Congress, right? This is in Philadelphia. This is a big deal. Before this, every colony was kind of dealing with England and their actions on their own. Most of the stuff going on happened in the colony in Massachusetts, Boston Massacre, Boston Tea Party, but the other colonies were being affected, and they were realizing this is a colonial problem, not a Bostonian problem. And so, very important, they send delegates, representatives from each colony to meet and discuss the England issue. Now, while they're here discussing this, unified for the first real time, some people want to kind of leave right away, break away, declare our own, nation and start going right away, United States. Others who are loyal to England want, cooler heads prevail. Let's talk this out. Revolution, war, are you crazy? So they're a little divided on what they want to do. And so the Congress comes up with a compromise, something we're very good at in the beginning of American history, reaching a deal that kind of makes both sides happy, but you don't get everything you want. So the idea is this: the colonies are going to keep boycotting English goods. Boycotts had helped in the past to get rid of things like the Sugar Act and stuff like that. So we'll keep boycotting to kind of peacefully resist and show England that we're angry. We will keep trying to work for peace, but on the other hand, in case war comes, we better get ready. So we will start to train militia. Militia is like part-time citizen soldiers. We'll come back to that soon. So hope for peace, plan for war is what they basically do. And they send a list of 10 resolutions to King George III at this time, basically kind of just stating again their reasons for being upset, the rights the colonies think that are being taken away from them. Just kind of a list. If you're upset with somebody, it's kind of like, hey, let's try and get a dialogue going. Let's talk about this. But it's during this list that one of the first times life, liberty, and property is mentioned as rights the colonists are losing, and we will come back to that also later on in American history. But the Congress, again, is dealing with everything as a unified group for the first time. So we're training militia. The militia give themselves a nickname called Minutemen, right? Because the idea was, I could make an inappropriate joke. I'm not going to. They're called Minutemen because they were ready to fight at a minute's notice, right? Most every home had a gun at this time. It was a tool that you needed for hunting and home defense. Firearms were common. So people just kept a gun by the door, and if there was ever trouble, you didn't got to get in a uniform. You didn't need to get dressed. Just go grab your gun, run outside, and you were ready to fight at the drop of a hat or on a minute's notice. Therefore, the name Minutemen. The Minutemen were training outside of a town of Concord. So these guys were butchers, bakers, candlestick makers during the day, but on the evenings and afternoons, they would get together and play soldier, basically, right? England had learned about this and didn't take too kindly, because if you think about it, right, you don't got to be a rocket scientist to figure out, well, who are these Minutemen training to shoot? Who are they training to attack? Oh, they're training to shoot English soldiers, right? Can't be having that happen. You can't be doing that. So England wants to put a stop to this, which kind of makes sense. And so they had were going to go march out to Concord to confiscate the guns, take the weapons away, so these Minutemen can't play soldier anymore. That was the idea, because again, they're training to kill English soldiers. There were a group of guys called the Sons of Liberty that hopefully sounds familiar. You've heard of before. There's a Metal Gear Solid game about that, but anyway, I'm old. These guys were very involved in causing a lot of trouble and ruckus. These were the troublemakers in the early days of the Revolution. And Paul Revere is one of them with others. And basically these guys were kind of spying on England. And so they knew if England was to make a move, we got to try and respond. So they already had some plans in place that if England was to move out, these guys would be messengers and they would go race through the towns, warning the Minutemen the English were, the British are coming, and they're going to come and try and take away their weapons. So Paul Revere is one of many that ended up riding that night, warning the Minutemen that they were coming. The story goes they held a lantern outside like a little lighthouse or something as a coded message. 1 light if by land, 2 if by sea, so they could kind of know the route England was going to take. Sea just means they crossed a bridge. There's water involved, I guess, whatever. But they had to cross a little bridge, so they're going to take the waterway route, and they were warning everybody. Again, many writers did this. Paul Revere is the only guy that had a poem written about him, so he's the one we remember. He gets all the credit. But the Minutemen had heads-up warning, and they got assembled to try and stop England from taking away their guns. They meet outside of Concord the next morning at a town called Lexington. And the two sides meet, and there is a stare down and a standoff that goes for quite a while, right? You got this ragtag group of Minutemen. Some maybe were ex-soldiers, but few had any combat experience at all, lined up shoulder to shoulder, and in front of them were experienced, battle-tested, drilled English soldiers, a line of redcoats. And they basically, like I said, it was a staring contest for a while. The Minutemen were not going to retreat. They were not going to give up their weapons. England didn't want to march through them, but I guess they would if they had to. Anyway, the staring contest doesn't last forever because eventually someone shoots their gun, and once one goes off in a very tense situation, everybody starts to shoot back, and we get what's called the shot heard around the world. We don't know who fired the first shot. It could have been accidental. It could have been a young, inexperienced soldier. It could have been a trigger-happy Minuteman. That's lost to history. But again, someone shot off their gun. Everybody else did. And the first battle of the American Revolution has begun. No surprise, the Minutemen don't do very well. They panic. They're inexperienced. And they run away and scatter because they're not used to fighting in combat against English soldiers who are used to this kind of thing. Anyway, they run away to fight another day. The English kind of laugh them off. That was easy. They march down to Concord, but the guns and the ammo have already been removed, so they didn't get, mission was not accomplished. And they turn around and end up marching back to Boston. But the Minutemen aren't done, and they kind of regroup and reassemble. And on the whole way back, because we can't fight toe-to-toe against the English, we are more than happy to adopt, I guess you could say, Native American tactics of ambush. And so we were sniping them from behind trees, behind bushes, harassing them the entire way. England takes more losses marching back to Boston than they actually do fighting at Lexington. And this is very poor sports. This is cheating. This is not how gentlemen fight wars. So kind of England very much kind of looking down on the United States right now and poo-pooing, I guess you could say, kind of our tactics and strategy. This is not how you fought wars at the time. But again, it was kind of suicidal to fight England on their terms. So we kind of get in some licks, I guess is what you could say. Now we get the Second Continental Congress. Now that shots have been fired, now that men have been killed, and now that we are at war, Congress meets again to talk about the issue. Things are a little more dire now. It looks like war is here, but still the colonies or the colonists are a little split. So during this time, the Congress appoints George Washington as commander of the army, probably one of the best, most influential, important decisions the Congress makes during the entire war, for reasons we'll get to. Basically, Washington was kind of the only candidate. He was the only guy with experience in the military. Didn't say it was good experience, but Washington is the man for the job. He's the right guy, and very helpful to help win the war. However, some people still hope that maybe we could walk this back. We could still try and peacefully find a solution. And so the Congress draft was called the Olive Branch Petition. Basically, kind of like an apology. Hey, we're sorry. We got in a fight. We didn't want this. This is not going to be good for either of us. Is there any way we can settle this and peacefully find a solution? All we want are our rights when it comes to trade and liberties. So it's kind of like a last chance to extend an olive branch was a symbol of peace to England, and let's try and avoid this kind of English Civil War, Englishmen fighting Englishmen. King George never reads the petition. Okay, at this point, George is beyond peace. He's very much kind of like the angry parent. As long as you live under my house, under my rules, you follow and listen to what I say. So he's done talking to the colonists, right? And they're rambunctious and they're causing trouble. He wants to spank them, teach us a lesson, you could say. So he wants a conflict. Because he wants to put the colonies in their place. It's also the Second Continental Congress is when the Declaration of Independence is written, right? So now that we're at war, what are we fighting for, right? We got 13 different colonies here, and some people may not understand what's going on. If you live in Georgia or South Carolina, this might be a little foreign to you, right? What's going on in Boston? Why do they keep dumping this tea in the harbor? We're going to be fighting with England now? My family could be in jeopardy? My job? My home? My house? What is going on? So the Declaration is kind of a way to get everybody on the same page and just simply state the reasons, not why we're going to war. It's not a declaration of war. It's a declaration of independence, right? And the reasons why we are leaving England to form our own nations and the reasons we are able to do so. If it comes to war, I guess, but that's not what we want. We just want our independence, and that every man, in theory, not in practice, is born with life, liberty, and able to pursue their happiness. All those things in the Declaration, written by Thomas Jefferson during the Second Continental Congress. Kind of a big deal. Just to wrap up quickly, looking at some of the strengths and weaknesses of the two sides now that war is here. Both of them have advantages and disadvantages over the other. And even though it seems like the colonies are very weak, which they are, they have some kind of hidden advantages that will matter a lot as this war drags on. So real quick, what weaknesses do they have? The colonies are very weak. They don't really have their own army yet. They have no navy at all, no weapons, no training, no ammo, no money. They have nothing. It's literally at the beginning of the war, butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers with guns fighting a proper military, right? Not really even. On top of that, the colonies are fractured, as you kind of saw at the Congress. Not everybody is gung-ho and really wants to go to war. Some people are what they call loyalists, loyal to England, loyal to the king, right? I didn't cause any problems. I don't have my rights taken away. So even during the war, until the very end, you had a lot of people in the colonies that still felt that they should stay loyal to England, and it wasn't everybody about patriots. It was fractured. There was a split, which we forget about today. They do have a couple strengths. There's a strong sense of patriotism. You can thank the Declaration for that in part, but we're fighting for something, right? We're not only just for our homes and our families, we're fighting for our freedoms. We're fighting for our independence. If that's not what we're fighting for, I don't know what is. So even when times are tough and dark, and they will be, the colonies will stick through it because they're fighting for something greater than themselves, right? Also, the colonies have a home field advantage. They live here. They grew up here, so they know the land very well. They know all the secret passages and places to do ambushes and how to retreat, all that stuff. So home field advantage is very important. And like I said, George Washington is key. Washington understood this is not a short war. The colonies cannot beat England on the battlefield, at least yet. So his strategy is basically to survive, right? As long as we have an army, as long as the Continental Army exists, even if it's small, right? As long as we have an army, the revolution continues. We can keep resisting. We can keep fighting, and that is better than losing, I guess. So his whole strategy in the beginning of the war is just run away, like I said, to fight another day. He gets a lot of flack for this. People don't look at Washington as a good leader. He's cowardly. He keeps running away. He can never win a battle, but that's on purpose. He knew if he stood his ground and fought England, he could risk having his whole army annihilated or captured. And again, if the army is defeated, the revolution is over. But just being able to resist is what's important. And winning battles doesn't matter. Losing battles doesn't matter as long as you can win the last one. And so that's what Washington's trying to do. And it's a winning strategy. But it takes time. It'll take time. Real quick, England. They do have a few weaknesses, but mostly they have strengths. So I'll go with their strengths first. England has deep pockets, a lot of resources. Yeah, they were taxing the colonies for money, but still they got a lot of colonies around the world. Very, very rich nation. And so they have the money to pay for soldiers, to pay for weapons, to pay for all. They have all that, okay? They just beat France just a few years ago in the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, the war that comes out of that. So they have a very experienced army, the best navy in the world, and again, the colonies have none of that. Besides having a large army, they also can use mercenaries. So if they ever need more soldiers, if they ever run out, they can just buy guys to come and fight for them to supplement their forces. And England will do this and employ mercenaries and these are, war is these guys' job. Mercenaries are pretty good at what they do. A dead mercenary is a bad mercenary. And so they will use mercenaries to supplement and add to their forces if they need to. But there are some weaknesses they're facing, which are a little understated at first, but end up mattering a lot. First of all, the colonies are huge, right? Way bigger than England, and each one is in rebellion. So real quick, England kind of realizes they have bitten off more than they can chew. So what if you can capture New York and get it under control, right? Massachusetts is still in rebellion. Pennsylvania is still in rebellion. Virginia is still in rebellion. And so it's a lot harder to conquer the colonies than they kind of first realize. Second, North America is very far away from England. You got the Atlantic Ocean in between the two, and so communication is very slow. Anytime new orders or directions are coming from England, it could take weeks or months for those to get to the commanders in the field. Reinforcements takes a long time to travel. So England is just slow. They got a case of the slows because everything is so far away. And generally, poor leadership. At this time, if you wanted to be, an officer in the army, you could just buy your way in, buy a commission. The English generals are always bickering with each other, doing their own things. They don't talk. They don't communicate very well. Everyone's got their own plan, their own strategy, but they don't always mesh. And so England is just their command is kind of very fractured and not very efficient. They don't really have great leaders during this war, and that will come back and bite them a couple times because they're doing 3 or 4 different things at once. That's not a good way to win a war. All right, that's it. That's the beginning of the revolution. Hopefully, again, that made sense. And taking something complex and trying to break it down and make it simplified so it's easier for you guys to understand. But until next video, I'm Mr. Duker, and I'm out. Catch you later.